All right, all right. Hello, everybody. I think you may have just heard the chime of the lovely grandfather clock here at the library at Eastside, and you are watching Together in Faith. Let me put up our title for this time. We're going to look at the commandments out of the Catechisms, and I wanted to have this come from our library here for a number of reasons. Partially just to talk about all these great books that we have that are part of this library and give you an opportunity to see this space. I'm going to turn the camera around because I want to show you the most comfortable seat in all of the church is that one right there. That couch is lovely. So you should come over and enjoy that when you get a chance. It's just lovely. Well, all right. So let's see here. Let me see if I can turn this camera back around. Hi. All right. So good to have you here tonight, and we have a hello from Colin and Harriet. Let's see here. I'm going to open up, get me on my right screen, and see if the comments can come in. There we are. Glad you're here. Excellent. And oh, hey, Janet Danielle. Glad you're here as well. And I suppose I could take off that title there. Now you can see good evening from Colin and Harriet and from Jan and Danielle. Glad to have you. So please do say hi in the chat. Excuse me, as we get going. So here's one of the things I wanted to show you before we get into our topic tonight, and why I'm sitting here at the big table in our library, because we really do have some really great books, and some of you sometimes like to read them. So let me just show you here. Up here, these are these annotated Luther books. All right. Can you tell we are a high production facility? So we have volumes 1 through 4. I'm going to read out of volume 2 tonight, and but we also have some really lovely other books. Timothy Lull's Martin Luther book. He was a graduate and a professor of the seminary in Philadelphia that I graduated from. Here we have required reading for every Slovak Lutheran. This is Yaroslav's Pelikan's Jesus Through the Centuries. And this was reading in my undergraduate. And a good Slovak Lutheran out of Chicago, and that whole tradition that I grew up in, I talked a little bit about last week. All right, so there we go. Man, I've kept oh, Dixie, glad you're here. And Judy, good evening. Glad you're here as well. All right, so many things that I end up not managing it very well, and that's all right. But I'm glad you guys are all here tonight. So we're going to talk about Martin Luther's take on the 10 Commandments. And all right, let me just start the pop quiz from back when you were in confirmation. Who wants to put it in the chat? The first commandment, or the second, or the third? Do you have a favorite? I think I have a favorite of the 10. So as you well know, the Small Catechism, this is one of the more recent copies of the Small Catechism. This is one that I've given out to our confirmation kids. This is Luther's Small Catechism with African descent reflections, and it's really lovely. That was for kind of everybody, and Luther made comments on the different commandments. But then in the Large Catechism, which is there's just a copy of just Luther's Large Catechism right here. So obviously a much larger book than this little guy. as you can see. But I really like reading Luther's large catechism out of this annotated Luther series, which just gives some really great background and biographical kind of information. And so we're going to do that a little bit tonight. Excuse me. And so, like as a kind of way to just get into this topic and to give you a sense, we're obviously not going to be able to go through every commandment and what Luther wrote, because he wrote pages on each commandment in the large catechism. But I want you to know about these resources that are behind me. You can come into the library anytime and just kind of check them out. And it's a lovely resource to have. So I'm going to go ahead and read Martin Luther's the Eighth Commandment and the little paragraph that he wrote that maybe you, like me, had to memorize when you were in confirmation. So here's Martin Luther's small catechism piece on the Eighth Commandment, and then we're going to go look at the large catechism. So here it is. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. That's the Eighth Commandment. There it is. Here's Luther's small catechism comment on you should not bear false witness against your neighbor. What is this? It says, we are to fear and love God, so that we do not tell lies about our neighbors, betray or slander them, or destroy their reputations. Instead, we are to come to their defense, speak well of them, and interpret everything they do in the best possible light. So in the 1500s, right, Martin Luther's using this you've heard this phrase, right? In the best possible light, to put someone in the best possible light. It's a lovely little short, easy thing to remember. Now, when he gets into his full-on definition, it becomes really, really interesting. I again brought my copy of the Kohlweingart Book of Concord because of all of the underlining that has been part of my life with this book. We have our own copy of that right here on our bookshelf, and so that's something you can access too. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit of the Luther's larger explanation of the Eighth Commandment. Okay, so again, you are not to bear false witness against your neighbor. Here's some I'm not going to read the whole thing. It would take the entire time. But here's what Martin Luther says. Besides our own body, our spouse, and our temporal property, we have one more treasure that is indispensable to us, namely our honor and good reputation. For it is important that we not live among people in public disgrace and dishonor. Therefore, God does not want our neighbors deprived of their reputation, honor, and character any more than their money and possessions. He wants everyone to maintain self-respect for spouse, child, servant, and neighbor. It's great, right? It's a really great start. So, going on, he kind of goes through the applications of this commandment. So he says, the first application of this commandment then is that all people should help their neighbors maintain their legal rights. All people should help their neighbors maintain their legal rights, right? This isn't an us and them kind of thing. For Luther, this is an us and us. And then he goes in to talk about, like, here's a special goal is set for our jurists to take care that they deal fairly and honestly with cases. Wherever there are upright preachers and Christians, they must endure having the world call them heretics, apostates, even seditious and desperate scoundrels. Moreover, the word of God must undergo the most shameful and spiteful persecution and blasphemy. It is contradicted, perverted, misused, and spiteful and misinterpreted. But let this pass. It is the blind world's nature to condemn and persecute the truth and the children of God, and yet consider this no sin. Right? He's a really bold writer. Here, the third aspect of this commandment, which applies to all of us, forbids all sins of the tongue by which we may injure or offend our neighbor. Bearing false witness is nothing but a work of the tongue. God wants to hold in check whatever is done with the tongue against a neighbor. To avoid this vice, I'm skipping down some. Excuse me. To avoid this vice, therefore, we should note that none has the right to judge or reprove a neighbor publicly, even after having seen a sin committed, unless authorized to judge and reprove. This is a great difference between There is a great difference between judging sin and having knowledge of sin. You may certainly know about a sin, but you should not judge it. I may certainly see and hear that my neighbor sins, but I have no command to tell others about it. So it's it's really, really interesting stuff. And what I wanted to do was comment a little bit. Like we've been spending a lot of time here talking about Luther. Luther obviously was a man of his time and didn't really, you know, could only know as much as he could know in his time. So when we look into the Large Catechism in this Annotated Luther series, again, we get these kind of sidebar comments. And so there was just this really interesting comment that I want to take from this eighth commandment here in his explanation. So he goes into this piece bearing false witness, and here's what he says. This appears to have little to do with us now. Let me start a little bit earlier. Where one may accuse and malign poor innocent persons and crush them by means of false witness, so that consequently they may suffer punishment in body, property, or honor. This appears to have little to do with us now, but among the Jews it was an extraordinarily common occurrence. Here he's showing a deep prejudice. Here's the little sidebar comment that this Annotated Luther piece makes. It says, statements like this disclose Luther's ignorance of the Jewish ways and lives on the one hand, and on the other, the medieval Christians' prejudiced view of the Jewish people as being prone to conniving and deceit. In reality, it was often the fellow Christians' lies that cost Jews their livelihoods and lives even. And so that's what I really love about this Annotated Luther, is that it gives some context, right, to what Luther is saying in these pieces. And calls him out when he's just doesn't know what he's talking about, because he didn't have any ongoing relationships with Jewish people. All right. So let me see if I can give you a little bit more of Luther's take on the eighth commandment. And then let me ask this in the chat. If you're curious, what do you think was Luther's take on one of the other commandments? Go ahead and just kind of put it in the chat. Let me know what you think. We are talking about, together in faith, the commandments in the Catechism. And so we're looking at those pieces. I'm reading mine because Luther has some really great things about putting people in the best light and some really great turns of phrases as he comments on the eighth commandment. But there are other pieces too. So here's another, this comes a couple pages into his comment on the eighth commandment. In short, what is secret should be left secret, or at any rate be reproved in secret, as we shall hear. Therefore, if you encounter someone with a worthless tongue who gossips and slanders someone else, rebuke such people straight to their faces and make them blush with shame. Then those who otherwise would bring some poor person to disgrace, from which one could scarcely clear oneself, will hold their tongue. For honor and good name are easily taken away, but not easily restored. All right. There's the lovely grandfather clock. Let me go ahead and cite from the ending of Luther's comments on the eighth commandment, because it's really great. And so here's how he concludes. No one shall use the tongue to harm a neighbor, whether friend or foe. No one shall say anything evil of a neighbor, whether true or false, unless it is done with proper authority or for that person's improvement. Rather, we should use our tongue to speak only the best about all people, to cover the sins and infirmities of our neighbors, to justify their actions, and to cloak and veil them with our own honor. we use our honor to then honor our neighbors. Thus, in our relations with one another, all of us should veil whatever is dishonorable and weak in our neighbors, and do whatever we can to serve, assist, and promote their good name. On the other hand, we should prevent everything that could contribute to their disgrace. It is a particularly fine, noble virtue to put the best construction on all that we hear about our neighbors. Putting the best construction on the story. Again, it's a turn of phrase that I always heard as a kid growing up. Put the best construction on the story. I don't know, did you hear that phrase too? That was something that was always told to me. And here it is in Luther's comment. Put the best construction on all that we may hear about our neighbors, and to defend them against the poisonous tongues of those who are busily trying to pry out and pounce on something to criticize in their neighbor, misconstruing and twisting things in the worst way. So this is his comments on the eighth commandment. And I'm curious, does anyone have are you curious about what Luther said about another commandment? We're not going to go through all 10. And in fact, we only have another 10 minutes or so together. But what are you interested in hearing about tonight? How have the commandments played a role in your life? Is this something that you find interesting? All right. Seeing no comments so far, since you're all scared of what Luther might say, because he is fearsome in his critique. I'm going to turn to his comments on the fourth commandment. Okay, so let me just kind of pull up. Anyone remember what the fourth commandment is? You got to be silent. Put it in the chat. All right, here it is. Fourth commandment: honor your father and your mother. All right, here's his little comment from the Small Catechism. We are to fear and love God, so that we neither despise nor anger our parents and others in authority, but instead, see you later, but instead honor, serve, obey, love, and respect them. Okay, so that's Luther's fourth commandment, the Small Catechism. The reason why I stopped at the fourth catechism is because I see in my wife's writing that she's not so sure about something. So let me see what she's not so sure about. First then, learn what this commandment requires concerning honor to parents. You are to esteem them above all things and to value them as the most precious treasure on earth. Second, in your words, you are to also to behave respectfully toward them and to not speak discourteously to them, to criticize them or to take them to task, but rather to submit to them and hold your tongue, even if they go too far. Third, you are also to honor them by your actions, that is, with your body and possessions, serving them, helping them, and caring for them when they are old, sick, feeble, and poor. All this you should do not only cheerfully, but only with humility and reverence, doing it as if for God. Well, I'm all of that is underlined, so I love it. I'm guessing it was even if they go too far, right? But that goes back to the eighth commandment too, right? Honoring your neighbor, putting the best construction on the story, putting your neighbor in the best light. Same thing here with the fourth commandment. Luther's running a theme. Let's see. Another piece that's underlined here. This one's in pen. This might have been me. So wrong to underline in pen in a book, but here it is. This is commenting on the fourth. If God's word and will are placed first and are observed, nothing ought to be considered more important than the will and word of our parents, provided that these two are subordinated to God and are not set in opposition to the preceding commandments. All right, there you go. Well, I see we have a few more joining, and so let me just, Marlos, glad you're here. And Charlotte, good evening to you as well. Glad you're here. So we're chatting about the commandments, and I've pulled out a few. We've talked a little bit about the fourth commandment, and we've talked a bit about the eighth commandment. And some of Luther's great words about them. And really, what I just wanted to say was that, we have these lovely resources, which is why I'm here in our library at Eastside tonight. Now, I wanted to pull up, again, this is Luther's Small Catechism, but this one has reflections from African descent folks. And I think this is a lovely reflection on the Eighth Commandment that I want to read here. This new publication of the Small Catechism came out in 2019, and has just a number of our African American Lutheran siblings in and making comments here. And so here's the reflection on the Eighth Commandment. We should be so respectful and in awe of God that we do not lie to one another or bear false witness against one another. Besides straight up, outright lying, these are some ways in which we lie and bear false witness today. Using white lies to protect someone, thinking you will do more harm than good by telling the truth, telling people what they want to hear instead of what they need to hear, failing to tell something that ought to be told for the common good. Snitching actually helps the community become stronger, not weaker. Telling partial truths that make you look good, talking about people behind their backs, betraying others by revealing secrets they shared with you in confidence, and passing along gossip that maligns or destroys someone's character. People of African descent, such as Emmett Till and George Stinney, lost their lives due to allegations that lacked proof or were false. At 14 years old, Till was lynched in Mississippi in 1955 for allegedly offending a white woman in a grocery store. Also at 14 years of age, Stinney was executed in South Carolina in 1944 for allegedly killing 2 white youngsters. Furthermore, greed and false statements have threatened the lives of African Americans in other ways. For example, people of African descent made up the majority of the population of Flint, Michigan in 2014, when the city changed the source of its water supply. Despite ensuing complaints about corrosive and lead-tainted water, officials were reticent to address the residents' concerns. And so here it gives some concrete kind of ways in which we, as people of faith and as a society, have failed to live up to this Eighth Commandment. And there's just really good reflections in this. And Luther does some similar things, and more broadly, 500 years earlier in his Large Catechism, and that's why the Large Catechism is so helpful. One of the reasons why, again, back to the Eighth Commandment, that it was so important for Luther, because we have the context of the Inquisition. And so another side comment on Luther here, as he's commenting on the Eighth Commandment, and here it is, that we don't bear false witness against our neighbors, and then it gives this little breakout. Luther condemns bearing false witness against one's neighbor and is in favor of minding one's own business in a climate of suspicion where the inquisitional procedures could be easily launched by feeble witness accounts or suggestions of wrongdoing with no sustainable proofs. Most apparent victims of this disordered system were the Jews accused of heresy and violence against Christians. Women also, suspected of witchcraft, and rebaptizers. Many innocent people were executed on false premises. Luther's admonish against harming one's neighbor with false words thus addresses a life and death issue. He knew how fatal the consequences of conniving words could be. And so they were living in a time, right, where you could accuse someone of something with no proof whatsoever, and it could lead to that person's death. And so he's commenting in real time. And I don't think the stakes are any different today, right? We like to think that we're a little more fair-minded or due process-oriented, but sometimes not so much. Well, I see we've got some more people saying hi, so let me say hi to Carol. Glad you are here. And oh, Kim. Well, I see it now. Glad you're here, Kim. And this one always jumps out at me. Are you saying the Eighth Commandment, or Danielle, or the fourth about mom and dad? Uh, we'll make sure that when Esley gets to the confirmation that we spend a lot of time on the fourth commandment. Oh, I'm just giving you a hard time. Well, I know the eighth commandment does jump out to me a lot. It's one of those things that's just applicable every day, right? Good. Yeah. Agreed. The eighth. Well, we're getting close to that time, folks. Really, what I wanted to, again, just kind of share with you is that we have this great resource here behind me, and I hope that you'll take advantage to it as you feel so moved. Had somebody come up and ask me just recently about, it's almost 2 years ago, when we did this reading of I Can Do No Other by Anna Madsen. And this is this book, we did this as a reading back when we were in COVID lockdown stuff. And we did this kind of community reading of it. What I found out was it's one book in a series. And in my sermon this last weekend, I talked about some of the rich heritage of our own Eastside Lutheran, in that we have multiple authors like in our Lutheran Study Bible, and this is the hardcover version that I used in my sermon, but the one I just dropped is our softcover version, which all of our confirmation students get. They're exactly the same on the inside. It's just a paperback or a hardcover. And Eric Heen, a son of this congregation, has written the preface to Hebrews, and Terry Fretheim wrote the preface to Genesis in our Lutheran Study Bibles. But what I also found out recently is that Terry Fretheim wrote a book in this same series that we read from Anna Madsen. His book is called God So Enters Into a Relationship That... And so he wrote this book. Actually, it was published a couple months before he passed away. He passed away in 2020. And I wonder if any of us would be interested in doing a group reading of Terry Fretheim's book, since he has a connection to Eastside. If you are interested in that, feel free to put a comment in the chat, or just text me or email me and say, yeah, I'd like to read that. If I get a couple people who want to read it together, maybe we'll make that our summer reading. We could read Terry Fretheim's book from 2020. That would be really lovely. All right, well, look at that. A half an hour, almost all done. The chimes are going to chime, and then I won't go over. But we're going to go ahead and end our time here, our Together in Faith, the Commandments in the Catechism, with reading Luther's evening prayer. And thanks for being here, folks. Always glad to be with you. And hope that we get to see each other soon. Pastor Lane and I were just chatting about having a Lutheranism 101 class again. We're going to likely do that in July, and we'll let you know about it, because it's for everybody. If you even just want a refresher, or if you're new to Lutheranism, then we get a chance to chat about that with a little more in depth. I think we talked about having that be July 12th. Yep, July 12th. We're going to do that July 12th. That's a Wednesday night. You'll get more information about it coming soon. We also have some really lovely events that are coming up. You're going to hear more about a July picnic we're going to do Sunday after church, and some more events that are coming for the rest of the summer and fall. So there it is. Boy, I thought I was going to hear those chimes. We're going to go ahead and do our Luther's evening prayer, and you might just hear the chimes come in. It's great to be with you. There it is. That's the half-hour toll. Let's go ahead and read together Luther's evening prayer. I give thanks to you, my heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously protected me today, and I ask you to forgive me all my sins, where I have done wrong, and graciously to protect me tonight, for into your hands I commend myself, my body, my soul, and all that is mine. Let your holy angel be with me, so that the wicked foe may have no power over me. Well, friends, it was lovely to be with you together in faith tonight, and look forward to the next time we get to be together. God bless. Have a great